this weekend and last weekend are the only 2 weekends of the year where the main focal person is John the Baptizer. So I want to spend a couple minutes talking about him and dovetailing with last week. I'm repeating myself, but remember last week he said, "Prepare the way of the Lord," quoting the prophet Isaiah. "The valley shall be filled in, the mountains made low, and the uneven ways straight, and the rough ways smooth." And I talked about the highway from God into our hearts. And on that highway, there are valleys and mountains and curves and rough places. Some of it's caused by our own weaknesses. Sometimes we put them there deliberately so God can't get too close. You know, we're talking about the valleys of self-pity or depression and so on, and the mountains of pride and the uneven ways, how often we wander from God, off the road, or the rough ways of our personality and so on, and that needs to be straightened out. And as I said, sometimes it's part of our weakness, but sometimes we put obstacles there so God cannot get too close, because we're afraid that God might ask of us something that we don't want to do. So John talks about the fact of making that path smooth so that God can get to us. Well, today, continuing then, John talks out in the desert, talks about the fact that he's not the Messiah, he's not Elijah, he's not the prophet. He's preparing the way of the Lord for the coming of the Lord. Now, the people of that time, like us, we have an idea of what this Jesus, Messiah, should look like and should act like. But as people of all time, we want to accept Jesus on our terms and not his. Now, remember that we believe Jesus is the divine incarnation of God. Jesus is God. He's not the Son of God in the sense of being less. He's equal. So he comes to us on his terms and what he wants to reveal to us. And most of us, I think, picture Jesus as a nice guy. He wasn't. He irritated people. He confronted people. Otherwise, why would he have been crucified? Because we've sanitized his message to please ourselves. We've turned Jesus into a Christmas card Jesus, or the Mormon Tabernacle Choir Jesus, or the Jesus in the mall, or the Touched by an Angel movie Jesus. But he challenges us to come out of ourselves and to follow his example. Now today, John takes us out into the wilderness, and that's where we're all invited to go. Because the wilderness breaks into our lives, whether we like it or not. We don't put the times in the deserts of our lives, and don't think physical now, I'm sure you're beyond that. We don't plan them. We don't put them on our appointment book. They just all of a sudden happen. And most of the time, we think of wildernesses as something bad. Sickness, financial problems, relationship problems, whatever. But that's part of it. But also think about wilderness as what we would determine as good times. Do you know that success could be a wilderness? Many successful people are not satisfied with what they have, or they're worried they might lose it. How many of us hear about the Powerball millions? And don't you say to yourself, I'd like to try to win that, to see what that's like. But many of the multimillionaires are not happy people. Look at the athletes. Look at the beautiful rich people in Hollywood that have everything, but yet are not satisfied. Many of them get into trouble with drugs or booze or marital problems, or some of them commit suicide. So success isn't necessarily good. It could be a great wilderness. And another one is retirement. How many people dream about retiring? They don't have to go to work anymore. They can go and play golf and fish all day long. But you can't do that all day long. And then when they're finished with that, they're sitting home twiddling their thumbs and watching TV. That is a wilderness. And all the other wildernesses that you're probably can imagining in your own life. Maybe you're going through something right now. As I said before, health, grief, sadness, the virus, isolation. And we're invited with John now to enter that wilderness. That whenever we have a loss in our lives, it automatically pulls us into the wilderness. And there in the wilderness, we look for the voice that will help us maybe not get out of it, but to make some sense of it. And that voice is only the voice of Jesus. He's the only one that can save us from ourselves. Now, if you're old like me, we were taught that the reason we're here is to save our souls. Any of you remember that? Isn't that pretty selfish? We are not here to save our souls. We're here to imitate the action of Jesus. That's why I read from Isaiah before the first reading, and you heard again. Jesus did not come for himself. He came, quoting the prophet Isaiah, "The Lord has sent me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to captives, and to release to those who are prisoners." That's what we're called to do, to take on the action of Christ, the work of Jesus. And by doing that, we will be able to save our souls. So instead of worrying about where we're going, the challenge in the wilderness is to find the ways of Jesus and to start living those ways that concern more for others than ourselves, because that will bring us to the ways of Christ. It's not me. We cannot live for ourselves. We can only live for others. And as we live for others, the wildernesses that we all face, the losses that we all deal with, whatever they may be, start to make sense. Because it's in the loss, in the wilderness, that we find our God. We find what's really important in life, and that's the ways of Christ. That's why Jesus calls himself the way. As we do that, that's what makes Christmas happen. It's not an event 2,000 years ago. It's something we want to live again. And we live it only by taking on the person of Christ. Go into your wildernesses. Find there the way of Jesus.
We thank you for joining us during the Advent season as we prepare for the birth of the Savior. You're always welcome to join us in person or visit us at mysaintelizabeth.com or watch us on Facebook. Blessed Advent as we look forward to the birth of Emmanuel, God with us.